Hi, I'm Sherman with Highland Park, and I'm going to show you how to replace the feed nut on a HT12 and HT14. It's really quite straightforward. What you're going to first start with, bring your carriage back. We want to remove the blade. So I'm going to loosen this up, take the blade off here. And I want to be careful not to lose my spacer. I'm just going to leave the spacer right there for now. Pull the blade off. And that gives me a little bit of room, because what we're going to do is we're going to then tilt this carriage up a little bit so that we can actually get to the feed nut. So the second step is I'm going to get a, this is a 3/16 Allen wrench, and I'm going to put this right underneath here, and there's a nut underneath there that goes to a roller block. So I'm going to get my drill driver. You don't need to use a drill driver, you can just use a regular tool, and I'm going to come where you're at. Like you can use a regular socket for this. But I want to get in underneath here, get to that particular nut on the roller block. There we are. And then I'm going to put a 7/16 inch wrench on the back side, because that's what's on the back side of that. And I'm going to pull that nut off, which is what I just did. So you can see I undid the, it's just a flat washer, and it's a nylon lock nut. And we like the nylon lock nuts. Now what I'm going to do is underneath here, I'm just going to pull this nut out the front with my other hand here. I've removed the roller block. So basically the roller block sits underneath there and it pivots, and you'll note on the top here, if you can see here, there's an Allen wrench, and when you tighten that up, that pushes this down and that holds it. And what's really cool about that design is if you get slop on your carriage, you can just slightly tighten that up, still so it rolls smoothly, slightly, but you can take any of the play out. On the old lower tones, you had to turn the saw upside down, so we changed that so you can adjust it entirely from the top, so you can keep your saw really precise. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my saw here, and then what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to get myself to where I can pivot this up. And I got to get actually up underneath here. So then what I'm doing is I've got the second one that's right behind the first one. Put my driver back here, and I may not be able to get it quite as a straight shot there. So what I'm first going to do is I'm going to pull this nut out here. And then my roller block, there's my second roller block, and then I'm going to see if I've got a straight shot to my third roller block right back here. And I may have to get at this with just a smaller Allen wrench. So the second one is a little bit more tricky, because I actually have to get the Allen wrench back behind that bolt for the second roller block. So there's, if I move the carriage over, I'll show you kind of where these roller blocks are. Go far over to the left, where I can show you the adjustment. See if we can see it.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, so you can see those two little Allen wrenches. So my other roller block's right down here, so I have to just reach underneath here, get my Allen wrench in place right here, and then give me that drill driver with the 7/16 on it. All right. It's kind of like doing surgery, but definitely lower stakes than being in an operating room. Yeah, I won't be able to fit it there. I could fit it with a ratchet, but I'll do this by hand. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to undo this last nut. Now, hopefully, some of the way these generally should be assembled is the Allen wrench should be in the back, because then you can just easily pull it off. This one's actually done backwards for some reason, and I've got to make sure that the assembly team didn't make a change to that, but it should be, generally the Allen wrench would be facing out the back, and then it's really easy to access. This one, in the case, they faced it to the front, and that's I'm having to get it out a little bit. Coming out fine, but it's a little bit more of a pain. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen this up just a hair, so I don't have as much tension on that. And now I can get the roller block off. There we go, roller block's off. So there's my second roller block off. Now what happens is I can pivot this feed nut handle, take it off, and I can lift the carriage directly off. So there we got our carriage off. Let's just clear some space. So so the carriage is it's a pretty slick design, because as you can see when I turn this over, the carriage slides on the rails against this. This is with the carriage, and these rails are hardened steel. They're made out of ground stock. Same thing you put like a cylinder of a bulldozer. And then this is your feed nut. So replacing the feed nut at this point in time is pretty straightforward. What you'll do is you'll get your 7/16 inch wrench, and you'll put this up underneath here. If you look underneath, if I tilt it, say this way, you can see I got a 7/16 inch nut right underneath there. And then that's using another one of those nylon nuts. And then to undo this, I'm simply going to go and I'm going to reverse this off. You can hold that handle and unscrew that, and then there is my feed nut. And then this spring just goes, if you see this spring just goes on here, and you want to have the spring right against here, so when you put it back together, you know, it's actually going to be sprung this way. That's correct. Let me just think about
No, the rails run this way.
It's going to be this way. So you'll have some tension on this thing. So we'll put it back together. We'll reverse this video, put it back together, because I know people want to know how to install the carriage, so we'll do that. So now we're going to, say we put our new spring in here. I'm not going to take this off, but if I feed my spring around here and get it in there, then what I'm going to do is I need to get this put back together. So I'm going to screw this nut in, this bolt in a little bit. And you can see I got my two rails on this side, the two flanges on that side, single flange on this side. Gonna tuck that up in there. And I'll just tighten this up here. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stick this here. So that's gonna naturally apply tension. So you can see the feed screw will come right through here, and this will spring to hold that engaged. And now with that, my next step is I just need to put this nut back on. Now you'll notice right here, it's actually you're almost able to get to the nut fully if you took this plate off. Now I would typically just take this plate off and be able to do that, but I can also get the nut in here directly. So I'm just going to take my flat washer, put that down here, and then I'm going to take my nut. This is the nylon nut. You want to make sure that for this application that you're using a nylon 1/4-20 thread nut. So in this case, I'm just going to put it in the box end, put it down here so I can get it positioned a little bit easier, and probably get this from the side. There we go. So I'm just screwing it on here. You may take a couple tries to get this, because if you haven't done this kind of stuff, it's a little finesse, but you can see on the bench, this is really easy to get at everything. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my open end part of the wrench. Again, it'd be easier if I just went right in with a socket. And I would suggest that if you're having trouble doing it this way, just remove the two bolts. I'll show you the two bolts on here. There's right underneath there's two bolts. And if you remove those 2 bolts, you do have a little bit of availability. You can't get a socket directly on that, but it does give you a little bit more visibility to it. In my case, I'm just going to basically turn on this end, tighten the thing up with the wrench. I'll actually use the longer one here. And you don't want to make this over tight. When you put this on, you want to have it so it still moves, and I'll show you what I mean. Because if you tighten this too much, then your feed nut will act funky on you, and it won't retract easily, and it won't snap in and hold the feed screw. And that's one of the common mistakes people do, is they think that everything has to be super tight. This actually just needs to pivot. And that's why we use the nylon nut, is once you find a position for it. And what I do is I tighten this all the way down to where I know I'm tight. Now I'm going to back off, and then I'm going to play around with the feel of it and say, okay, I like that feel. You can see it moves fine. So it pivots, but it's not going to move anywhere. And then with that, I'm just going to reverse my process. I'm going to go, I need to pull this feed handle all the way forward, and I need to then get it so that, and also I have to turn this knob. I have to get this so that I can get on the feed screw. And let me just see where I'm at here. So there we go. So on the rails, I'm turning this, and now you see it drop down. And now my feed screw, that's how it engages in the rails, right there. And then all I need to do now is to just reinstall my roller blocks. Now this time I'm going to install the roller blocks. This one on this side, I'm going to come from the back side. I find it a little easier. I can put an Allen wrench on the back side, put my gun on the inside. So we'll do this one first. And I'm going from feel on this. It's kind of, you know, the easiest for me. If you really struggle with this, the whole saw can come out of the tank, and you're able to position the get at the underside if you wanted to actually turn this upside down. But in this case, I'm not wanting to drain my oil or go through any of that. So give myself a little more space. I'm just tightening, putting this nut on here. And just like we did with the other ones, I want to snug these down. I don't want to make them blazing tight because they're not moving. I just want to be able to have them snug enough so they're not going to vibrate and come loose. This one, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to come in. I'll reach in from the back with this hand, where the roller block coming to the front here, and then I'll get find the hole where this goes on the flange right there. There we go. And put that through. And I'm going to loosen this a little bit too because it's fighting me. So now I can slip it in easy, and then I'll get a nut and a lock washer right here. Put that in underneath here. Now everything I'm showing you goes for putting a new carriage on. If you're putting a replacement carriage in on a saw, it's going to be the same process. Now I would say one thing: if it's a replacement carriage on an old lower tone, these two rails, the center line of these rails, are inconsistent across the lower tone years. So what matters is that your carriage needs to be positioned over the feed screw. That's your main positioning. And then what you may need to do, if you put your thing so they can see where I'm pointing. Can you see my finger there? Yep. This rail may need to be moved that way or this way to line up with the carriage. This is the one that, and you want to make sure that this is parallel here, and there's some adjustments on that. But you want to be able to position that so you maintain a center line here so your feed screw is not being pulled when it's sitting on the rail. So you may need to change the hole. A lot of times it means taking like a rat tail file and widening out the hole so I can move that rail, and then I can have the carriage sit over the main feed screw on the center line, because the feed screw is your center line on the saw for the carriage. And then you move your rail. This one is less critical because it just sits on that pad. You're generally fine on the lower tones. It's usually the inside one that you have to change. let's put our last roller block in. So this, I'm gonna go do this one from the front just for my preference. I'm gonna move this in here, get my screw lined up, get right underneath here. And I'm just gonna slip my roller block in and move it, and then I'll get my screw in the hole. There we go. And again, if I wanted to make it easier on myself, I will slightly loosen this up, which is what I'm gonna do right now. Is loosen this up, because right now it's fairly snug, and it's a little bit tricky for me to put this in. So I'm gonna just loosen that up. Now my nut just slipped right in. Now I'm gonna take a washer on the back side, take my locking nut, and then what we're gonna do is get the drill driver thing. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm going to push my carriage back. I won't put this one in first just because of my preference. It really doesn't matter which side you tighten up. I'm going to get my Allen wrench. I mean my adjustable, my 7/16 inch wrench on here. Reverse my speed. I'm actually going the wrong way.
You lose the nut.
I just reversed it off. Because I'm upside down, so I just have to find, there's the nut. Put it back on there. You will get some oil on your hands, but the beauty of this oil, if you're using the Highland Park oil, it's good. All right, so I got that snug. Now I'll do the final snug with an Allen wrench. Similarly here, I'm gonna snake in right here and tighten this up. And then I'm going to move my carriage back, do the same thing. I'm going to get my hand underneath there first with a wrench, there, and then a wrench. Gotta love these Milwaukee brushless DC drill drivers. It was actually Milwaukee that inspired us to be moving to the brushless DC on a lot of our stuff, because they're such terrifically built industrial. And if you're in the trades, everybody's running Milwaukee. And because it lasts a long time, it's very strong and very energy efficient. Okay, just gonna loosen that up a little bit, but not much. You don't have to really worry too much about these. I just slightly loosen the nut after I've put it in there. And now you'll notice in the carriage, I have a little bit of movement. You see there's a little bit of movement there, like here, up and down. Right there I get movement. So I'm just gonna use this, snug in just a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to test to make sure that the roller bearing still spins. I like to have it so I feel a slight drag on the thing, but it's that one feels good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to crank my carriage over the other side. So this is where we're really adjusting the carriage to make sure it's really sit there and you give a really perfect cut with this. And that was the beauty with these saws. When John and I did this saw, we didn't think it would cut as well as it did. We knew it would be a good saw. We knew it would be better than the old lower tone Spartan saw because we had improved a lot to it, but we didn't think it would cut as well as it's ended up cutting. Now what I'm doing here is as I tighten this up, I'm just spinning the wheel until I feel it touch a little bit, but I can still spin the wheel. And that gives me a real nice adjustment. Okay. And there you have it. Then we'll put the blade back on and you're good to go. So replace the feed nut. If you're putting a new carriage on, that's how you put the new carriage on. Same applies for the HT14. They're both the same, just slightly different form factor. So I hope that helps. If you got questions, give us a call.